the privacy officer is in one of the best positions to look across the organization and then collaborate with a lot of other departments such as risk, data governance, if that exists, human resources, the legal teams, to be able to classify that data out there as well too, and then be able to apply the same principles that has always been going on in privacy and looking at data minimization and data deletion. And I think that's going to be really interesting as we see privacy departments become also more technical versus more policy related.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Future of Data Security. Today, we're welcoming Chris Pahl, who's the Chief Privacy Officer at the County of Santa Clara. Chris, it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So you have quite a diverse background, and I'm curious today how your experience in both private and public sector organizations shapes your approach to protecting citizen data. And in particular, how do you balance government transparency with the need for privacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. What is interesting about data privacy, regardless of industry, is it's all really the same. It's just how the data is managed potentially can be a little bit different, plus also all the regulations. But at the same time, we all follow the same principles, such as NIST principles as well, and applying those, uniformly, regardless if you're in the private sector, public sector, or other sectors as well too. I think what's interesting in the public sector is the public sector has more of a trust component as well. People are obviously have to give their information to the government for certain purposes, but also have a certain suspicion of that as well. And my role is to ensure that the information is being used responsibly, but also allowing the county to fulfill its mission as well too. So it's an interesting dance that may not be in the private sector, but definitely is more prevalent in the public sector.
Do you feel that private sector organizations are getting away with more because there's not that much scrutiny?
And I think it also depends on the culture of the organization as well. I've worked in financial services and then for an investor-owned utility in California, and definitely there's risk tolerances as well. I think the mission, though, within the private sector generally is innovation, profitability. In the public sector, it's more of accountability and delivering the right services to those in need.
And what's the most critical privacy risk that people and organizations often overlook in your experience? And are there some misconceptions as well about data privacy?
That's a great question. I think a lot of organizations miss is the value of privacy within the whole ecosystem of lifecycle development, whether it's system lifecycle development or even data governance as well. What a lot of people don't understand is there are other ways you can achieve the same end result by minimizing the risk. And that's where the privacy organization comes in as well. And I think that's, probably the best part of having a privacy organization as well. And probably the most understood part, that the privacy organization is generally not a money-making department, but also if it's set up appropriately, it actually can contribute to the overall mission of the organization.
I like to say it's always management's fault. So, it's probably more of a leadership problem than like a NIST problem or framework problem. What are your thoughts on this, drawing from your background in leadership governance? How do you align and communicate the value of privacy, the various privacy initiatives across an organizations, and particularly across non-technical teams? And since we're in the holidays, maybe there are some privacy grinches you need to align.
Definitely. One of the biggest opportunities for any compliance organization is to build relationships and build them as soon as possible. And I've learned this when I was really young in my career. When I was at a financial services company, the general counsel told me, Chris, don't let people meet you for the first time when there's an incident. Get out there and meet people. And this kind of goes back to the central theme of trust, which I try to achieve in my current organization. And the value of privacy is only as good as what the department can give and add to the department. I think a lot of people see compliance organizations in general as a department of no. I don't like to ever be the department of no unless there is just it's unethical or illegal. But in most cases, you can negotiate and you can find the kind of the middle ground that both sides can achieve. And a lot of that is understanding what the business does. And you have to get out there, you have to talk to people, you have to understand what they're doing, they have to understand their pain points, they have to understand your frustrations, and then come along as a partner and trying to solve the issues together. And so the more often that you're out there with people, talking to people, not making it so difficult for people to do their jobs, and actually having processes that are aligned with maybe other like processes, like maybe cybersecurity or physical security that are trying to protect, can really help show the holistic value of privacy in a bigger context.
I think we've come a long way from the basically world of safe harbor where organizations could do whatever they wanted with data to today where obviously citizens and data subjects demand more. How would you rate the acceptance within organizations? Is there a lot of pushback, or by and large, that change has been accepted and people are willing to support privacy initiatives?
I think it depends. It depends on parts of the organization as well. We all understand that there's a company culture and then there's subcultures. And what I've generally found is that the departments that have the most interaction with personal information, such as human resources or customer service or even marketing, will be more open to having you come versus maybe a more technical organization or a back house organization like accounting that may not understand that they have the information. They may not be the collectors of it, but they're consumers of it, and really trying to get them to understand the value that they have, and the value I have to help them achieve that. Because a lot of the times I
Mm.
get is like, well, we got it from customer service, we got it from marketing, we got this from human resources. That's true, but every person that's handling the information throughout that life cycle has the same obligation. But my role is to actually be able to tailor those conversations, and make them beneficial to show them what their role is and then how to identify issues, escalate issues, and where to seek my help.
In my field, it's always the software engineers that are saying, "Hey, what do you mean I can't use the production data to do something?" Right? Speaking about software development and technological evolution, I've had a lot of conversations this year about generative AI,
Mm.
and there's also a forever increase in data breaches. How can organizations keep their privacy policies agile while balancing data protection?
That is a good point. And as generative AI has taken more of a hold, even in my organization as well, it's really important that the privacy department kind of step forward and look at more of a holistic view of data governance. The privacy department, along with the companies that may also have a data governance role, need to really understand the sensitivity of that and be able to build guidelines and policies that do allow certain transactions or certain activities to occur, but they must do so in a way that fits that risk tolerance. So the privacy policy or data governance policy can't be so restrictive that individuals can't achieve what they're trying to achieve, but also it can't be so liberal that potentially confidential information or other non-public information gets fed into the tool. And we are really focusing on that at the county as well. And a lot of counterparts in the public sector are also trying to do that dance, as I said a little bit earlier, is how do we achieve innovation, but allow for efficiencies to happen. And one of the really unique parts of public sector is making sure you don't cause public harm and civil
Mm.
liberties harm. So that's a very interesting process we're trying to work through.
I've had a lot of conversations this year about shadow AI and organizations concerned about, even though they've, banned or paused the use of generative AI, everyone's using it. People are concerned, where's our sensitive data going? So I think that's a big theme for 2024 that will continue next year. What are some of the risks that you've seen already or that you think will be in the near future with generative AI?
It is really hard to predict where generative AI is going to go because it's obviously exploded in the last 2 years and it continues to kind of evolve. I think the biggest risk is individuals don't understand what they're doing and they may think they're doing the right thing and they're actually causing a lot of harm. And this goes back to like a culture in an organization that has to have the right communications and controls. Shutting off generative AI and prohibiting it may not be the best thing to do because employees are going to find workarounds. Employees want to get more efficient. They want to do their jobs better. They see how these things are happening. But being able to really anticipate and get ahead of issues, speaking with departments, having a vetting process is really important. I think the biggest concern is more automation out there without the human in the loop is really going to be a concern. And we're seeing a lot of AI pop up in healthcare, which is a very valuable area to do so, but also a riskier area to do. And again, as governments and public sector look at how to do automation, how to be more efficient, I think the biggest concern in that area is a tool will inadvertently harm a lot of individuals and the organization may not know for years, or it may give out bad information, resulting in people doing actions that was not really anticipated.
We saw a couple of such events this year with lawyers using generative AI and then mistakes were made. Switching gears a little bit, how do you measure the success of a data privacy program? Are there qualitative or quantitative measurements that you prefer? How do we know it's working?
Yeah, I've always been asked that question in the past. How do you know you've been effective? And obviously, compliance groups are about risk mitigation. And if you've effectively mitigated the risk never shows up. So it's really difficult sometimes to see if what I did that actually help prevent issues from happening when the issue never happened. In the past, sometimes I've looked at number of data breaches, looking at number of incidences, have they gone down? Maybe what's the result of training? But another part of the success is integration into like processes. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier about being part of the life cycle management process and being accepted. And I think when you're more accepted by the business and you're sought out by the business and they want to hear from you, that is success versus someone else that's resistant and you are forced into their process at the end and you cause a lot of chaos when you stop a project. So I think the more you're invited to the table, it shows there's an effective governance program or a privacy program occurring.
Yeah, you're right, because it's always the issue of measuring something that didn't happen. So adoption, involvement of the data privacy office into programs is really the key. Switching gears again, surveillance technologies. There's a lot of technologies out there monitoring employees, what they do, what they're not doing, what data they have. Do you have a view on that and some of the privacy issues around that topic?
You know, it is interesting. I think surveillance for certain things may be warranted. It depends. Like, for example, when you're looking at cybersecurity and others purposes, you want to actually, look at different tools to look at your network. Surveillance is all about transparency and making sure people understand what you're trying to do so they know what is being expected of them versus the got you approach. We've seen organizations before use keyloggers and others to see, is this employee really working from home? That's a cultural question, discussion. This keeps going on as well, too. There's a trust factor as well. And it's important to make sure that there's that transparency and understanding, accountability, and even outcomes and potentially, penalties for, not following rules as well, too. In the County of Santa Clara, we have a very unique ordinance about surveillance technologies where those do have to come to the Board of Supervisors in a public forum where everyone has the opportunity to weigh in, to ask questions. And these surveillance technologies that are approved are published on our public site. And it's important for the public and employees as well to understand what we are doing and how we're trying to do this. But in part of this is the privacy office's role in ensuring that the data handling, collection and handling continues to be reasonable. And at the County of Santa Clara, the privacy offices manage the surveillance use technology ordinance. And it's not an IT organization, it's the privacy office, because we understand that there's a lot of data collection and data sharing and data handling and obviously deletion of that data. And since that data is so integral to the surveillance technologies, it's important that the privacy office play that role, and to question and to push and to learn as well. And I think that's another thing that's really important for our privacy office is really learning about the technology to ensure that you have a full understanding of how that occurs. And when that happens, you can build appropriate policies or processes and also monitoring. And when we do that as well too, we don't just turn something on and allow it to go. We continuously monitor. We have annual reports. And so I think when that privacy office is continuing to be involved with that department, surveillance technology can be reasonable. And it can also spot issues as well too, and be able to pull something back if something is occurring that it shouldn't be occurring. So again, it's just that lifelong process of looking at
Mm.
technology while it's still in use and ensuring that it's being used appropriately.
We work with a lot of banks and insurance companies that have a lot of data, and often people ask me, what about the employees' privacy that your solution will monitor? And over the years, I found that most organizations come up with basically a rationalization or a policy that says if you're going to be involved in that business and you're going to have access to all this data, the surveillance is now at table stake and it's part of the employment agreement. Do you think that that view is now prevalent in organizations and sectors where employees touch sensitive data daily?
The employee, as I always train people, are the human firewall, and you have a lot of technology in the background. And if for most cases, I would recommend that departments educate their teams on what they're trying to do and what systems are out there and what ramifications for noncompliance. I know it's very prevalent. You log into your computer every morning, and there's a banner that most people just bypass, but that banner just says there's no expectation of privacy, and and has a long disclaimer. Everyone just passes through
Yeah.
every morning, or every time you log in. Yeah, exactly. It is. Double click, they go through. But part of it is having training and awareness and continuing to reinforce good behavior and being able to identify problem areas. And again, this is where the privacy program comes in. And you really need to educate employees and say, yes, we do have tools out there. But again, use your training, use your gut feeling. Does this really feel right? Who do I contact if I have questions? And, mistakes do happen. People do make legitimate mistakes and we deal with those. But also people do make some harmful mistakes on purpose. And that's where the tool can come in and really identify what is going on. I think personally for myself, when we in the private sector, we had tools where we would get alerts from people doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing.
Mm.
And I used it more of a training opportunity to really talk to the employee or the manager and say, this alert said that you did this. Our policy says you're supposed to do that. And I really try to dig down and truly understand, is there an issue with my training and awareness, or is just the employee being sloppy? And sometimes it's a little bit of both. But again, the tool can be really valuable to also catch someone that's intentionally trying to go around
Mm.
those guardrails. But again, that human though is the best judgment I have, regardless of the technology.
I found many data security professionals that also feel that having a tool, whether it works or to what degree it works, has a great dissuasion effect on the bad behavior, which is interesting with human psychology. Another trend I observe this year, and it's continuing, is to place the employee at the core of the data security and privacy, meaning that if they knew that they had accumulated too much data, or if they knew they were contravening a policy, 99% of the time they would do what's right for the organization. What's your view on this team and putting the employee at the center of data security and privacy?
The employee has to be the best trained person you have out there. And again, the employee knows and should know about what is authorized collection and use and sharing of information and what is not, and also the best person to raise a flag if there's something going on. But that also depends on the training of the organization and the culture of the organization. A lot of companies do an annual training and people just click through it because they want to just get through the training and they want to move on. But this is where privacy programs and compliance programs can come around and wrap around the employee and have the employee be that central figure to about what information is being collected, how is it being collected, where do I get the privacy department involved, again, going back to trust, I can reach out to that department and have a conversation regarding the information. And that person's at the human firewall. So I have there's a couple different slogans I've used throughout my life in training just to get people to understand the implications. So I like to use the word security, but I drop everything out except the U, the R, and the I, and the T, and it's you are it. And those are some of the central themes I remember in my training to say, regardless of all the technology, you're it. And I'm here to support you. If something goes wrong, it's okay. Let's talk through it. And the employee feels more empowered in that case to really, handle information and see issues that I'm not going to see from my department.
That's a really good one. I heard for the first time today, you are it. How do you envision the role of the chief privacy officer evolving over the next 5-10 years? Is it going to morph into something else?
I have been thinking about that. I've also been talking with some of my peers here at other counties in California. In the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, recently published a white paper showing about the role of the privacy officer really changing more into data governance. And we're seeing that here at the County of Santa Clara as well, too, is that with AI coming on, we have to look at data more holistically versus in just one of its verticals. So we all recognize that there's PI and PII and PHI and many different flavors of it, but there's also a lot of attorney-client privilege information, other confidential information that we need to look holistically across the role. And I think that the privacy officer is in one of the best positions to look across the organization and then collaborate with a lot of other departments such as risk, data governance, if that exists, human resources, the legal teams, to be able to classify that data out there as well too, and then be able to apply the same principles that has always been going on in privacy and looking at data minimization and data deletion. And I think that's going to be really interesting as we see privacy departments become also more technical versus more policy related. So we're moving more into privacy engineering or red teaming as well. So we're kind of, going along. Cybersecurity is far ahead of privacy, but privacy is starting to come along that area as well too, because to be effective, you really have to understand the data architecture and the whole data lifecycle as well. And so the data privacy officer is not going to have a boring job. I can tell you that.
In a way, these developments in generative AI are giving more power also to chief privacy officers to perhaps be more technical, get more information that wasn't available previously.
I agree. And certainly something that's happening in my organization as well, too. I actually think it's quite exciting because someone told me there is no right answer right now. Everyone is learning. Laws are still immature or developing, but we still have the same frameworks out there that we've been using for years that we can continue to build our platforms. And I like innovation to begin with. I think it's fun. It's interesting, but I also understand, we need to pare it back, where possible as well too. And in certain cases, test it, see how it works.
I've already gotten your you are it golden nugget. If you could give one piece of advice, another piece of advice to organizations out there trying to secure their future in terms of privacy, what would it be?
I think you can't boil the ocean. I know that's very cliche to say, is really start small and then build out as well too. I've been fortunate to build a couple programs in my lifetime, and naturally I want to just tackle the world and get it done with. Start with policies and procedures first. Look at your linkage to other departments. Look at cybersecurity, look at physical security, understand where maybe some of these like processes are, and then build your coalition, because that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And when you show alignment with people, that will be good. I think the other thing I would offer is be curious, but also be passionate about what you do. I'm very passionate about privacy. I know people are very passionate about their jobs, and I like what I do. And so I like to have fun with it and come up with these little silly slogans. But again, if you're relatable, you come to the table with best intent, solve issues, you can go a long way. And again, you don't have to hire 5 people. You can start with one person with enough sufficient authority to start the process, and then over time, continue to build teams where it makes sense.
If you were to give some advice to a younger Chris, a younger self, or a new professional starting in this space, what would be your top 1 to 3 pieces of advice?
I did not realize, and I think as you mentioned before with AI, just how fast things have evolved. I have had to learn technology. Fortunately, I was in a cybersecurity role for a couple of years, and that really helped me out and really encourage everyone to look not only from a policy perspective, but look at a technical perspective and try to get that technical knowledge, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, where you can do job shadowing or maybe some training as well. I think when I rounded out that skill set from policy and technology, that has really helped me. I think the second thing I would say too for my younger self or other people getting involved is raise your hand and ask to get involved. I get asked several times, how do I get into the privacy industry when I don't have experience, but the privacy industry requires me to have experience? There are many organizations out there that you could, go to, get involved in those, raise your hand, and sometimes be vulnerable is very important as well. And I think the final thing is always approach things with best intent, because a compliance organization always is dealing with non-compliance issues, and it's easy to get frustrated and to think everyone's out doing the wrong thing. When you approach it and really look at root cause analysis and really say, is it the human's issue or is it my issue with the training? That can go a long ways because people start seeing you as more of a human. You're being empathetic, but also at the same time, you're enforcing the rules. I think that's really important. And compliance departments need to have people-oriented type people out there versus more analytical people. And both roles are fine. You just need to have a balance of those.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Chris, before we wrap up, if people want to follow along with your work, what's the best place for them to go?
The best way to do is you can always reach out to us at our email address, which is privacyoffice@ceo.sccgov.org. And you can always find me on LinkedIn as well, too.
All right, amazing. It's been a really fun conversation, Chris. You sound very user-friendly, probably the chief privacy officer that everyone would like to work with. I've learned a lot. I've got a few golden nuggets. So thank you very much again. Let's stay in touch.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.